So, the Sony PSP was quickly becoming the second best-selling handheld of its generation, which said a lot considering that they were a whopping 2 to go around overall. Meanwhile, the non-canon realm was also still in full effect, with the MGS4 team having many a behind-the-scenes squabble while Konami was getting more and more money-hungry waiting for the titular forced sequel, and sadly, the acid game sold kinda not great. Which may have had something to do with the first one also being not great, and so they needed a spin-off that could fool people into thinking that it was mainline. Taking place once again in the series' history, chronicling Big Boss on somewhat of a throwaway adventure that wouldn't impact much of anything, so it technically could be canon. However, they soon started to run into some roadblocks. Sure, all of the Square games showed that big, bold, beautiful cutscenes were possible on the PSP, but Konami, money, and time. Plus, it doesn't take a genius to see that maybe the visual novel camera pans of Acid fame weren't all that exciting. This is where comic book artist Ashley Wood comes into play. Dude had worked on many a Konami property before, drawing the art for the Silent Hill and Metal Gear comics, none of which were particularly great, but hey, at least that meant that he was somewhat decently familiar, so who better than to animate the stylized water-painty cutscenes for their new handheld game? Well, animation and comic are indeed not the same thing, and while they could have just dived in dicks first, they figured that it would be better to, I don't know, maybe remake some shit just to try things out. A retelling, perhaps, of MGS1 in the prototype style for the upcoming game. Yeah, sure. That will totally sell well.
Indeed. Colonel, what's a Russian gunship doing here?
Man, I was not expecting this to be fully voiced. Especially with this now being Hader's third time having to go through MGS1's once again revised script. It is MGS through and through, it's the same events, plot beats, twists, and so on, just with acting that's a bit...
It's probably already been armed with a warhead.
Hey! Shut up in there, will ya?
different. And the whole thing's also being rewritten by the writer who wrote the script for the comic based on MGS1. So it's a rewrite of a translation of the original script, with Kojima's hands-on involvement being just about as dubious as it was with the other spin-offs, seeing as he only had a producer role together with Okamura. And yet, surprisingly, it came out mostly shit. By and large, for better or worse, it does exactly what it set out to do, i.e. feeling like one big 2-hour Metal Gear cutscene, with only just a smidge more elegance than the codec-laden, banter-heavy dialogue and directing of the games. I mean, it starts with Campbell bum-rushing Snake's mullet hut to give him intel, seemingly mashing the breathing tapes with the submarine scene, getting the same amount of info across in a much more succinct and visually engaging way, like how, say, a movie would do, along with some other neat creative directing choices like that, like showing off the synergy between Raven and his birds more, highlighting some casual banter between guards, strategically rearranging where certain codecs happen to turn tutorial waffles into plot-relevant flavor text, showing and not just telling you about Otacon's and Wolf's relationship, and also some more questionable things like implying that Grey Fox was being brainwashed by Mantis, that Liquid and Ocelot were fighting like a sad married couple, thus not making them seem in control or intimidating at all, Wolf torturing Meryl emotionally, fucking up the sympathy you'd otherwise have for her, Snake continuously referring to Otacon as kid, despite him being 25 at this time, and they also got this quote wrong, and so now I am upset.
What's with these guys? It's like a scene out of one of my anime movies.
What's also kinda clumsy, though not due to any one person's direct fault, is how they translated the gameplay to video, largely resorting to wee transition time lapses that you wouldn't typically be using so much when writing a story from the ground up. They kinda stick out, and sadly also show how lo-fi the animation often is, what with Snake Silhouette.png just sliding across the screen through the rough drafts of the Snake Man's Guardmans as he awkwardly narrates a basic walkthrough of the game. Again, they really couldn't have done this any other way, as not including these would have made shit feel super disjointed or too different from the source material, and sometimes they do pretty neat shit here as well, like turning the bosses into these quick, snappy, stylized highlight reels that used the clever gameplay elements to make for a smart shooting and quipping Snake.
Now I'll show you why they call me Revolver. Draw!
Please, careful!
I love to reload during battle. What? A steam pipe? Ah! Damn you! That hurts!
And how they handled the codex is also quite great, often cutting back to Campbell and the gang chilling in sub, which makes their interactions feel a lot less abstract. It doesn't make the writing any better though, what with Snake addressing Campbell as Colonel Campbell instead of just Colonel, him immediately waxing poetic when he sniffs Liquid's luscious locks for the first time.
That's him. Liquid Snake. Other than a difference in skin tone, he could be my twin. Background murky, but one thing's for sure. He's the enemy. The solid versus the liquid.
As if he can already smell the epic rivalry that's about to unfold, and as stated, characters often need to narrate shit cause blurry visuals.
Golem falling! Ah!
Admittedly, this is a very interesting art style in that it's only kind of animated. The drawings themselves are very sketchy for one, looking quite similar to a lot of the promo art what Shinkawa would do, just with the loose layers of the photoshopped up shit sliding across the screen as ripple effects and pans add a bit of movement overall. In a strange way, it's really not all too dissimilar from what I do for my videos, only then with a bit more effort put in, like me, say, putting the arm of a character on a separate layer and then waving it about in post. It's simple, not all that time consuming compared to the alternative, and pretty darn effective for something as rugged and grimy as Metal Gear. Especially when you consider that it does actually use like a shit zillion drawings, much akin to comic book panels. It's just, the issue is that you can clearly tell that some of these shots were directly traced from gameplay footage from either the OG or Twin Snakes, and in some cases, like during the briefing, from what appear to be very hastily placed 3D models and assets. Not to mention whatever the fuck is going on here. It's a bit inconsistent, and sometimes a tad too sketchy perhaps as well, but I could definitely see this working out in a less constrained environment, which is exactly what we would see. Getting probed in prison by a solid dick, escaping and starting his own militia like a big boss. It's Big Boss. Anime terrorists have taken over a military base in South America, you see, because it can launch a nuke, but they need money and info and launch keys and stuff, and so that's why they brought Big Dick to the base. Boss Gawk be like no, though, and so he hooks up with a fellow detainee, Roy Campbell, where they then proceed to drug and gag random dudes from the back of a van, forcing them to cooperate, slowly but surely overthrowing the base. Base, in this case, being the size of a small country, with towns, sub-bases, bridges, warehouses, caves, and comm towers for you to sneak on into to acquire dudes. Which is pretty much a new main gimmick. Functionally and luckily, it's like the mainline games. Snake Mans, Guard Mans, clear objectives, bits of backtrack, and the return of the Lego, just Sensor Radar cause still old. But when you inevitably break the game by tranking everyone, you can at least slowly drag them back to van where you can assign them to do shit or take them with. You got map with levels that are laid out in the MGS 2 and 3 base tradition, and as the story progresses, more levels will unlock. Within these, you mission, grab intel, find guys, pick up weapons, watch cutscenes, that sort of thing. And on map, you got menu allowing you to save and allocate and manage your boys, like say, putting some of them in the medical unit so health and stamina will replenish faster in between missions, or put some in weapons development so one can unlock more gear over time, and of course, putting them in the spa unit so they can gather info, aka side quests for you to do in the levels already storied, and assign them to your own team, being that Snake does not level alone. Thing is that many of the lads will have their own skills, like being able to retrieve items quickly, drag dudes faster, or blend in due to wearing the same uniform as the enemies on stage. Each level will also have various boy points, so to say, where they can be stashed in boxes from which you can awkwardly switch between them to stash them elsewhere when need be. Almost, sorta, kinda, like a stupid Rainbow Six. What all of this means though is that it'll very quickly turn into a game about spending half of your time dragging dudes and switching to the boxmen just to pick up some items. Obviously, at some point, you're gonna have enough guys which will smooth things out, but if you want a well-oiled crew, which, I mean, you do, then get ready to spend a lot of time doing this. It's one of those design choices that really makes me wonder how they never thought to streamline this a bit more. I mean, surely during playtesting this had to have come up, right? Granted, I do remember it being far less tedious playing it in proper handheld mode with other shit going on, and you can also speed up the process somewhat by instead dragging a brother to your bro, call phone, and have them do it off screen. Though, even that's a bit long-winded and repetitive at times. Still, it's hard to deny the simple addictiveness of chain draining a map for all that it's worth by effectively using your mans.
Who's that?
As stated, the levels and patrol routes are laid out pretty well, using the option heaviness of the rooftop drop crawl space based designs of 3 and the more clear-cut Lego-based nature of 1 and 2. There's loads of levels as well, by the way, all boasting a gimmick or two to call their own, cleverly using trenches, alleys, walkways, ladders, and vents for maximum exploit and explore, and it's also worth noting how big some of them are, likely to accommodate for you going back to each at least 4 or 5 times just to get some extra goodies. Sadly, the game's PSP-ness does come in the way a bit here. I mean, sure, the moveset isn't compromised at all, which is great, but in that they kinda had to pull off this shift key for symbols type of control scheme that sees you holding down one button to change the functions of the others and also D-pad camera. This game, much like MGS2, has a lot of tight corridors indoors, which do give way to that very tense, sneaky, corner-peeky type of stealth that I love, but the amount of times where the camera got crammed into Snake's cranium were a bit too much. Luckily, the visual elements are a lot less important, as you see, the radar, or rather what's left of it, will now only show audio. So, akin to the vision cones, you really only have to worry once you start seeing red glow. Though, elevation not showing up on it does make it a tricky dicky and less of a full-on giveaway than the titular cones. However, to compensate for the lack of analog sensitivity, they also give you a straight-up sneak button that'll dampen your own audio output when walking, which is something the levels will play into pretty darn well as well, using a vast variety of surfaces emitting all kinds of sounds when walked over, and by also often placing guys behind thin walls and around cheeky corners, forcing you to audio more better. It's basically the game. Shit's addictive. You go to a place to do some story, grab a boy or two, find the secret weapon that your spy unit told you about before, get back, read some reports, gain knowledge of a secret optional prison child, go there, take the child, blow up the trucks as a diversion and to weaken their ability to back up, get back again, restock and equip the lads with new tech from your developmental unit, assign the prison child as a top-tier info spy, do some more story, get back, be more better. Shit just keeps up a great flow like that. The missions are short, the quick hints or long-winded banters of well-animated plots string it along nicely, and there's always loads of new rewards back at base and a few things to briefly manage. It's really quite simple. You won't be spending hours in menu, nor will the amount of boy units ever reach overwhelming numbers, and in that, things never start to feel like busy work either, or like shit's distinctly optional. It is a short, small, 12-hour-long-ish game that's just jam-packed with shit flung at a high frequency. Plus, the day and night cycles and shifts in enemy placement means that even after having visited an area 5 times over, it'll still feel kind of fresh, especially due to how big they are, and even how they themselves will have a very nice flow as you clear shit. Switching to Snake to trank the groundmen, embody the fast guy to drag him back to Snake's box, let him carry them all away, brainjack the delivery guy to get all the goodies, and then go back to Snake to finish off the stage. Bam! Cleared as fuck. Sadly, they do kinda miss the opportunity for proper classes, both on your end and on the enemy's end. Like, say, a big heavy armor enemy and a big artillery snake boy who cancel each other out. But even then, given how menu-driven and unintuitive the switching system is, they're probably better off keeping it simple for now. In either case, it's a very solid system at its core that works well for sure. Even enforcing stealth a bit better in that you all share ammo from the same pile, and also hunger bar and few health items like what 3 did, making Ramboing out rather ill-advised. Not to mention that you can't cop dead boys and that taking shots accurately is fucked anyway because of the PSP's analog. So really, Portable Ops is probably the closest I'll ever get to non-lethaling an MGS game.
By stabbing us in the back.
You're talking about the Kremlin's policy shift. If the existence of this base came to light, the political fallout with the United States could fatally undermine Moscow's position in the strategic arms limitation talks that Brezhnev is promoting.
Need to catch your breath after all that exposition you did there, buddy? Kojima did not write or direct this. Neither did Shinta or Shujo or Okamura or... Instead, they got Gakuto Mikumo, a man who writes books. Now, I don't read books, but I have it on good authority that they are for nerds and cowards. Not sure how that applies here, but what I'm trying to say is that this is definitely written by someone with little to no knowledge of previous MGS games, writing a short but sweet game plot on its own, only to have Kojima's goons rough him up a little after closing hours at the gulags because the dude didn't cram in enough real-world events. And so, suddenly, nondescript South American country becomes a Soviet murder base, blacklisted, taken over by the Russians after the Cuban Missile Crisis, blah 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 blah. And before you know it, you end up with lines like,
the political fallout with the United States could fatally undermine Moscow's position in the strategic arms limitation talks that Brezhnev is promoting.
Anyway, because the anime terrorists are former Fox Unit people, aka Snake's old gang, the banter cast of 3 is put under suspicion and are forced to help Snake from a distance. So, does this mean that the epic jokes, memes, and full-on bullying are used to full effect once more? No. Both Paramedic and Sigint have about 5 minutes of text-based unvoiced screen time combined and are written with the amount of character of a wet fucking towel. To make up for it, I guess, the terrorists themselves are quite the colorful bunch who, much like in 1, hang around the base making many appearances, actually scheming and fleshing themselves out, kinda. There's Cunningham, the peg-legged torture man who uses crazy technology, Python, the frosty hellraiser who's actually Snake's old partner, you know, ESP lady, who ESP, Null, aka Grey Fox, aka Frank Yeager, aka Null, who is being cultivated as the perfect soldier, which is somehow a ninja, I guess. And finally, Gene, the calm, charismatic leader who wants to start his own country, nay, militia, for disenfranchised soldiers, blah blah blah. He's just big boss. But not this big boss, but this big boss. You know what I mean. It is weird though, innit? They keep repeating this shit. I mean, Volgan aside, all MGS villains are more or less the same guy. Big Boss, Liquid, Solidus, Leon, Gene, the future ones that I can't mention yet, all go on about a world where soldiers are free to do blah 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 and not fight for blah blah blah, but for blah blah blah, and so I will make the base called something something heaven blah blah blah. And then also something devious like nuking the US, which then makes them evil. And this kinda goes for the other anime terrorists as well. Sure, Frosty here is OG, though he gets by far the least screen time, but Cunningham is literally just a fat black ocelot. ESP lady is just the ESP lady from Acid with the exact same twist. Null is as mindless as he is and functionally the same as the ninja from MGS1, and Gene is, again, just a Big Boss copy. Not a clone, a copy. That's a very important distinction here. In any case, while these guys might kinda suck on their own on paper despite fooling you into thinking that they're cool, there is one key factor that brings them all together, making them almost exactly that. Elisa is a researcher working for Gene who thinks Snake is the shit bomb diggity. And so she'll help him out, resulting in many a goof
Form.
and gaffe.
It's not like that.
How exactly did you manage to get a girl like this? Don't you think she's a little young? I mean, another 5 years and she'll be a real knockout of a woman, but...
Let's go, Snake.
However, she is the sister of the evil ESP lady who is silent and evil and therefore bad, and is also taking care of Null. Now, despite that, she does realize that Snake must do what it do when the time comes regarding her sister, but when it comes to Null, she does not want Snake to hurt him, even going so far as to say that he'll need to go through her to do so. She loves him, you see, cares for him at the very least, seeing as she's monitored his catatonic state for fuck knows how long and is well aware of his tragic past. And if that wasn't messy enough, she also gets big info from Cunningham, who is less than nice to her, thus essentially putting her in the cute girl stationed at the base giving deets as well as romance role. She's the glue that binds it all together, adding drama and emotion, and also, whoops! She was actually the evil ESP lady all along, just with a split personality. And thus, Gene finna use her to control Metal Gear, only then it blow, and so then Gene is all like, I like the boss more than you did, Snake. And then Snake is all like, nah, bitch. And then it was all Ocelot's doing anyway, so none of this matters because he wanted to overthrow the pre-Patriots to form the Patriots together with a mysterious benefactor, and this was needed to do that somehow. I don't know. Shit's dumb and pretty inconsequential to the plot overall. Though, that isn't to say that it ain't entertaining. For one, it has some amazingly dumb plot twists, like Sokolov is alive.
Who have you been talking to?
He doesn't know what you're talking about.
You'd better start talking.
Please, stop this!
Who is Khrushchev's lapdog?
How can you do this to him?
I know you gave the data to someone.
Never do
You!
that. You monster.
I guess he's dead.
Sure, I'd buy that. And Campbell is a one-liner meme machine, and really, it isn't so much about the destination, but about the adventure on the way there. Being that shit's really well paced, like a slow mystery uncovered through Snake and Camp riding around the base like crazy, chasing the ever more urgent tale of Gene's nuke schemes. Shit's good. Besides, it has a nice bit of themage going on as well, in that the gameplay, aka the boy nabbing, shows how Big Boss learns to become Big Boss and that only he can truly create the militia blah 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 plan the villains had as well. Live Big Boss, die Big Boss. Which in this case, as stated, is Gene, who is made to be the perfect leader and was also mentored by the boss, so there's defo some epic rivalry yin-yang in there somewhere, just not very well thought out. And hey, it looks great. No more bat tracing and shitty PNG slideshows. It's uniquely stylized, being very angular and spiky and rugged, using dramatic expressions to accentuate the comicness of it all. Always on model and scored immensely well by the ever-amazing Norihiko Hibino. So, yeah, while it's not quite a masterpiece, Ops certainly does live up to the standards set by 2 and 3 in its own way. Fully proving that you could do a super solid MGS game without Kojima. And oh no, this was Konami's plan all along! While the Acid games both had mobile ports that nobody played, Ops did not. What did get made was an original game for phones that nobody played. There's an N-Gage version, which is what we'll be looking at here. And I do mean looking. Far as I can tell, there aren't any available working N-Gage emulators. All I could find were working progress GitHub folders, and getting an N-Gage with the actual game downloaded onto it and figuring out a way to record it is far too much of a long-term project for a video such as this. So I'll be stealing footage from Stut33 Heisman. Anyway, the game starts with this horribly malformed Solid Snake crawling into the base like a solid snake, in full-on silence like a mid-2000s flip phone game. Which base, you ask? Well, this actually takes place in between MGS 1 and 2 and aims to tell the story of when Ocelot leaked Rex's nudes all over the internet, resulting in loads of new Metal Gear projects cropping up from rogue governments. And with Snake and Otacon starting their Metal Gear takedown group, it is up to them to take them down. Which is done, surprisingly, through standard issue MGS. Snake Man's, Guard Man's, Lego, minimap, vision cones and all. I can't really speak on the controls, though looking at the N-Gage itself, I can only assume that they were top-notch. Much like Ops though, it is legit quite admirable how the full moveset is accounted for, including the first-person aiming, as well as it having pretty legit great level design. For real, due to the lack of story, there's more MGS2 style set pieces here than in MGS2 itself. Putting guards in fun places you need to sneak by, the nodes returning, which is cool, there's fun photography missions, not to mention it using MGS4 stealth ammo years before MGS4 did. Seriously, you lean up against the wall to sample the color so you can stay hidden better. It's a pretty well-rounded package, to be honest. Yeah, there aren't any crazy gimmicks like rocket missiles, but in that, it is a more distilled Metal Gear experience that seems like it could be pretty fun. Additionally, their writing is also pretty alright, feeling like a self-aware, rundown, straight-faced parody of Kojima's writing. Right out of the gate, Otacon's all like, "You're the best, Snake," and then Snake is all like, and then Bumbles begin to bumble because dude never checked his sources, with Snake remarking that maybe he should have done that before he snuck in. You can just feel the salt from the tanker chapters spew up on deck. That source, by the way, being Dr. Victoria Reed, a girl who had been stationed there for a while with initials that spell out VR because the whole thing was actually a simulation. I fucking love this. I love Otacon telling Snake to wash his hands after using the bathroom, and I love how the whole simulation starts spazzing out, interchanging between looking normal and like the old VR mission games. It's pretty fucking neat. According to the credits, Kojima worked on this only as a supervisor, together with Shujo and some other Gulag dwellers. Aside from them, all of the names in the credits were new to me, which is because this game was developed solely by IdeaWorks Game Studio, a UK developer responsible for many a mobile meme such as Resident Evil Degeneration, Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus Lost Episodes, Need for Speed Underground 2, The Sims Bust a Nut, and also the infamous N-Gage version of Tony Hawk. Honestly, this ain't too bad of a rap sheet as far as mobile games go. And Snake's face aside, it's hard to deny how good this game looks overall as well. Had I played this as a kid, it easily could have fooled me into thinking that it was a certified Kojima butt banger, and so props shall be handed out thusly. Yay! Woo! Finally, they also made a digital novel remake of MGS2 that was to be released alongside MGS4, which is just a mixed fucking bag. It's by the same team, in the same style, and starts off just as clever, media resing the tanker chapter, having Snake and Otacon discuss what the fuck they just saw as he makes his way to the tanker hold, and adding writing that's like,
Yeah, but still, Snake, you gotta say, worst timing ever.
But then the Sorrow shows up, and Snake kills Solidus. And then they show Raiden at home being booty called by Solidus, which is fucking dumb, as the banter they pull is woefully out of character for either.
Now listen, you son of a bitch.
A lot of the writing is quite awful, actually. Lines don't feel natural, thus being awkwardly read out by the otherwise solid actors, and shit's also needlessly expository due to them needing to cram all of MGS2 into a 3-hour time slot. And I don't think I need to tell you that 3 hours of what is essentially one giant Metal Gear cutscene is a bit too much. Especially now that all of the Campbell-based subtlety is as good as gone, and with Raiden sounding too rising.
So who was that blood-sucking freak that kicked our collective ass?
Though, much like Ops, the animation and art are much better, and they also handle the gameplay segments pretty cleverly too, instead opting for cutaways to elsewhere in the base. It's not accurate at all, what with Fortune fighting Raiden in the room where he meets Stillman, but it makes for a better viewing than the alternative. Where it falls apart, sadly, is with all of the other liberties that it takes, foreshadowing just about everything. I can give tons of examples, but even something as seemingly minor as Rose and Raiden arguing at home prior to the mission about her being assigned to takes away a lot of the tension and buildup of how their relationship tenuously falls apart over the course of the entire game. Like, they've had their fight now. The edge has been taken off, so to say. Not to mention that they made Raiden cool.
You're not the man I'm looking for.
Oh, baby, you're hurting my feelings.
This one's just dumb. And nothing like MGS2. Dunno if that was the intent, but I mean, given the title, you'd think that it would have been more accurate, though I will say that it is quite entertaining on its own merits, due to said dumbness. Ocelot being haunted by the sorrow and liquid in his brain is fucking hilarious, and Raiden spouting Action Hank one-liners is just as funny as it was in Ryzen.
Wait a minute! This isn't real! This is a...
Dud. As in worthless and broken. As in you, Jagoff.
Raiden, step aside.
This is Karen Hojo.
Nice Police Notch reference also. We can always do with some more big black cock. You know, I do wonder if they, somewhere in between this being released right before MGS4 at peak hype cycle, and it completely reframing and de-abstracting Raiden, the ending, and all of its world-shattering meta elements, were trying to, say, retcon MGS2 to make the transition to 4 less jarring. I mean, Raiden is cool and gruff and capable, Rose's existence is far more concrete, Liquid's arm shit is less odd as Ocelot keeps his voice, Olga and her kid are much more heavily discussed, and MGS3's baggage is also brought in. So, I'm just saying, maybe that's what this is. The canon MGS2, or an attempt at it at least. But hey, that's just a theory, a sausage. Goodbye, my love. And so we've reached the end of the filler arc. Konami and Kojima had proven that MGS as a series was A, highly milkable, B, can survive a proper tarnishing, C, does not require big money Kojima, and that D, the Gulag clones were highly expendable and interchangeable. Now, all that's left is for me to mention that Portable Ops also had an expansion pack of sorts called Ops Plus that offered tons of multiplayer maps, modes, and playable characters like poor pooping Johnny. And that MGS4 is finally on the horizon.